Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze. Thank you so much for joining us. I apologize. I was gone yesterday, but now I'm back, and I will give you the heads up. Yes, we are dealing with some internet issues, but rest assured, if this live stream does go down, I will have it uploaded for you. I'm recording it right now, so be patient. We're going to continue to get through this. The internet that used to work so good, unreliable, can't trust anything these days. But you can trust the Word of God, and so that's what we're standing on. That's what we defend. And so now let's talk about a few things today that I wanted to get to. Number one, let's talk about Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins is obviously maybe the world's most famous atheist, and he came out recently with a comment on being a cultural Christian. Obviously, he rejects the premise of Christianity, that there is a God, and he has really done a lot of damage because he's become very prominent, defended his position of atheism. There's been a kind of a resurgence of the atheistic movement, and one of those things is he's kind of been part of the problem. It's partly his fault that we see this rise in a lack of people believing in the Bible, going to church, things like that. And as a result, he has even kind of seen the fruit of his own labor, and he doesn't like it. He actually does defend that we need Judeo-Christian values. He says that it's a better religion as opposed to Islam, some of the other alternatives. But this is where things get interesting. He won't accept the faith, he won't believe in it, but he says that for all intents and purposes, he is a cultural Christian because obviously he realizes there's some truth within Christianity that is good for the flourishing of society, morality, things like that. You don't get to have your cake and eat it too, Richard. You either stand for the clear truths that are evident in the world, and that is the result of the Judeo-Christian value. You can attribute that to evolution all you want, but the reality is at the end of the day, we have these values because we got it from a higher power. And he says that he likes Christmas carols, and he likes churches, and he likes hymns, but the reality is if nobody actually believes in those things, you're not going to have Christmas carols, you're not going to have hymns, you're not going to have churches. It's amazing to me how you can see with your own eyes that Christianity has been a fundamental good to the world, that it has produced the greatest democracies, the greatest economies, the greatest, you can even argue, the militaries the world's ever seen, and yet even though you have all that evidence in front of you, you want to reject it and say that we don't need to believe in it. So you're happy that there are fewer Christians, yet you're sad that the values in it are going away. Well, congratulations, you accomplished that. That's your own doing. So it is a big deal for him to acknowledge at least he's a cultural Christian because he's acknowledging the truth, the good that is in it. But the absolute fact is, the entire biblical worldview that we have is based upon God being good. He is the ultimate source of goodness, everything that He has created. He said, this is good, this is good, this is good. It is only the rebellion of God's creation, man using our free agency to go against His will, that results in the suffering that we see in the world today. Goodness has the capacity to create. God is the ultimate source of goodness. He creates. Goodness creates things. It is good for a man and a woman to get married. It is good for them to procreate, have children. Children are a good thing. They are pure. They are innocent. I really do believe that. I don't think that you can look at a child, for example, my 2-month-old triplets, and look at them and say, wicked, 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 evil, evil, evil. No, there's an innocence to them. There's a purity to them. And it makes us be more innocent. It makes us be more pure because we have to be careful what we watch, what we say, what we do, because there are those innocent lives that are watching us as we live our lives. Wickedness and depravity, those always lead to chaos. It leads to destruction. It's the law of entropy, enthalpy, thermodynamics. Chaos breeds more chaos. Wickedness is chaos. It throws out all the rules. It throws out what's morally good, what's true, what's good, beautiful, lovely, and it rejects all that, and it leads to destruction. That's why the communist dictatorships, fill in the blank, those always result in chaos. I know that China looks like they're doing great. One day it will crash. Now you can say the same argument for the West and the Republic and the democracy. Yet, the ideas of the republic and the democracy will live on, where communism only results again and again in further lives being lost. They want to claim that religion has resulted in more deaths than any other cause. Not at all. Look at Marxism, look at the ideas of socialism, communism. It always leads to nothing but a pile of dead bodies. So Richard Dawkins, it's great that you acknowledge that Christianity has the truth of morality and goodness, but if you're not going to accept it, you don't get to claim that you are somehow upholding morality whenever you're saying the fundamental truths of those morality are not grounded in actual fact. It's just evolution, it's just advantageous. And so the atheist argument is ultimately nonsensical. If you truly were an evolutionist, Richard Dawkins, you would become a Christian yourself, because it is clearly advantageous to have those worldviews, to have those principles, to have those values. All right, so speaking of atheists, agnostics, fill in the blank, coming around to accepting the truth of the Christian world, Judeo-Christian values, religion, Jordan Peterson's wife, her name is Tammy Peterson. She has officially converted to Catholicism. She joined the Roman Catholic Church. I have mixed feelings about this. For one, I think this is going to be the gateway to where Jordan Peterson will eventually convert to Catholicism. I really like it that he is coming around to accepting that God does exist. This is fundamentally true. And even in Catholicism, that Jesus is the Son of God. I just wish it wasn't Catholicism. Catholicism has a lot of theological issues, and it's obviously incorrect. It misunderstands the kingdom. It misunderstands what God is doing today. Has a lot of eschatology problems. So I really do have mixed feelings on the matter. I think it's great in some cases or some aspects of it, and at the same time, I wish it wasn't Catholicism. But at least it is a form of religion. And Jordan Peterson, you've got to think eventually he's going to come around. I will say the reason why some of the intellectuals do like Catholicism is because it does take a very serious approach to the Bible. It takes a very serious stance. It takes a lot of passages literally, where standard evangelicalism does not. It really ignores some of the very serious matters addressing baptism, repentance, confession, things of those nature. Now, obviously, so much of Catholicism is a self-contrived religion and doctrine. They have developed their own systematic theology, and the Pope have decreed certain things that have become doctrine and all of those matters. So that's a big problem. It's a big issue. But I've said it before, the Catholics do take the Bible more seriously than the standard evangelicals do, because the standard evangelicals will see passages like repent and be baptized and say, well, it doesn't actually mean be baptized for the remission of sins. It's all about faith, and fill in the various answers, the supposed solutions that the standard evangelical approach has. So the Catholic Church, why it is appealing to some of the intellectuals, is because it does have a consistency when it comes to how it interprets the Bible. Overall, I think it will be good that Jordan Peterson's wife, and hopefully eventually Jordan Peterson, are practicing, at least Catholics. Some kind of religion is better than none. Even if they would have converted to Judaism, for example, that would be better than agnostic. It does make you wonder, though, what's going to happen with Islam? And we always speculate about that. I noticed that there was a study, I believe maybe Cliff or somebody shared it on Facebook, about what is going to happen to Islam in the coming years, the coming decades, maybe in the coming centuries. It's a very weak religion. It's the same reason why Mormonism is so limited in its scope, because it's not limited in that same way because Mormonism didn't wage a holy war across, the jihad across the continents. But it is a religion founded all upon the words of one man, divine, mysterious revelation. It doesn't have the historical case for it. It doesn't have the theology case for it. So it makes you wonder what is going to happen ultimately with Islam. But the two world religions that are going to continue to be strong is Judaism, because it has history and it has theology on its side, and Christianity, because it has history and theology on its side as well. Christianity is standing on the shoulders of the Jewish belief, the Jewish faith. And Christians got to start realizing that. They really do. For us to really reject the importance of the Jewish people throughout history, and they really do. And that's what frustrates me. If you take the Bible literally, if you take it seriously, you cannot come away with it with a sense that God does not have a future for Israel. If you read the Bible and you come away with a doctrinal position that God is done with Israel, you have done the Bible wrong. You have misinterpreted it. You have rejected a plain reading of it. It's a serious issue. And there's always the running joke that dispensationalists are there was a video of different types of martial arts that Christians do, and the dispensationalist was Krav Maga, because that's what Israel invented. And the joke is, oh yeah, dispensationalists are always so big on Israel. Israel's so great. Well, that's because they're God's chosen holy nation. They're God's chosen holy nation. Islam rejects that. I think ultimately that's why Islam's going to fail. Islam is going to fail because it is such a strong rejection of Judaism and the Jewish people and Israel. Christianity has stood because, even though as non-Israel supporting the Catholics are, because they replaced them, it still has a fundamental truth and has stood the test of time. And that's why Christianity will continue for a time, and Judaism will continue. But any world religion that gets away from the fundamental truth of Israel being God's chosen people, they are destined to failure. They are set up to eventually crumble, because the evidence, the history, the theology, all of it supports the legitimacy of the nation of Israel as God's chosen people. And replacement theology is really going to fall apart. It really is. And so there's my comments, my thoughts on the issue surrounding Jordan Peterson and Richard Dawkins as well. That's why atheism is going to fail. Atheism is going to fail because, once again, if you are not acknowledging that there is a fundamental significance to the nation of Israel, the land, the Holy Land, all of that, that's what's so frustrating about Christians to me, is we, and I say we in a general sense, we have downplayed the significance of God's covenants with Israel and His promises to them, and yet we want to treat the Holy Land as some significant event. The Holy Land and Israel are one and the same. Those are married, tied together to each other. So if you want to have this great love for Jerusalem and the Sea of Galilee and the Mount of Olives, like, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too. Those are Israel things, and for you to walk in, that'd be like walking into somebody else's house, kicking your feet up and saying, all this is mine, get out. No, that's not how that works. So atheism is going to fail. Islam is going to fail, ultimately because it does not acknowledge the fundamental truth. In Christianity, if we don't get our act together and start realizing that there are promises to Israel that are yet to be fulfilled, the fullness of the Gentiles may come in and come in very fast. That's all I'll say about those matters. A few comments here, looking that are coming in. Scott said the last two generations' worldview begins and ends at their smartphone screens. Yep. Yeah, we don't know anything beyond that for certain. You also added you watched a couple services, masses from the big cathedral in New York. And yeah, you have to admire that they put on a good show. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's something, the beauty of Roman Catholic churches. The Baptist churches used to have a little bit more of a sense of that. They would make a point to make the churches out of brick, even out of rock. Hugo, Oklahoma, it doesn't have a traditional church look, but Hugo, First Baptist Hugo, is a very pretty church. And I hope to see one day where we get away from the modern buildings. And I say that as somebody whose church is made out of sheet metal. And the reality is, you can afford what you can afford. I would encourage any church. And this goes kind of counter to what I used to say, because the idea was, if you got that extra money, use it for the poor. If we make our churches look just like any other building, you're not really setting yourself apart in any significant way. I think that if any church is going to do a new building project, and this is something that I would want to talk to my church about. If we're going to do a new building project, especially if you're going to build a new church itself, the sanctuary, the auditorium, go enough of a distance to make it look like a traditional church. If you can afford brick, do brick. Stone would be great. If you could afford to do a very nice, pretty steeple, do the very nice, pretty steeple. If you can't afford that, nice siding, like the classic white side church, whatever, make it look like a church. We need to get away from a church looking like any old standard building, because the Catholics do have something going for them, because their church has tradition. There's weight to it. There's a sense of gravity, and really, when you walk into that, you are in a church. That's why so many churches today are so casual. And I'm not saying that you've got to have some kind of spiritual, legalistic, take off your shoes, you're on holy ground type view of church. The church building is the church building. It's not some holy, anointed thing. The body of Christ, the people that make up of it, we have been sealed, given the promise of salvation. The church building in and of itself, it's not like we do sacrifices on it and the Holy Spirit of God dwells within that church at all times. But I don't know. Let's try to recapture a sense of the timeless beauty of a church. And I know that home churches are just fine as well, and that's, if you look at Christianity, the faith that we refer to as Christianity, Bible believers, I would really appreciate it if we made a point to recapture the beauty of the traditional church. And if we ever are so fortunate one day at my church to do another building, the idea of trying to do nice, pretty siding, brick or something, I think it'd be a worthwhile endeavor. Yep, the Methodist churches have, my mom commented, it's very pretty. And the stained glasses. Used to, Baptist churches had stained glass. My old church had stained glass, and now we've swapped them out for just regular windows. I don't know. There's something to be said for a classic, beautiful church that I really do have a lot of admiration for. I think it's something that we need to recapture again. Trailer heard me talking and said, "Munkle Mark." Good morning, Trailer. Hope you're having a good day. That is my nephew. Ken commented really quickly. Good message on the gap theory. Thank you, Ken. I'm going to talk about and recap session number 3 here in just a minute. Here's another thing that I wanted to talk about. The good old reliable website Christianity Today. They had an article. I'll bring that up and show it to you. It's interesting. Christianity Today, I've realized, is such a liberal organization. So squishy. Those rhinos over, there may not even be rhinos. They may be outright leftists. But here's an article that they had. With Texas deportation law on pause, migrants turn to the church. So Texas is looking to pass legislation that would allow them to deport migrants. It's funny. Illegals. Illegal is what that means. Not migrants. Christianity Today, you woke Karens. I don't know. That may not be nice. Karens is kind of a racial slur, but it's the idea of the classic college-educated lady that makes up a large number of Democrat support. That's why women need to get married, because they're a lot more conservative when they get married. It's funny, but I look around and my wife, very conservative, and then any of her friends that are not married really still tend to be more liberal. And even those of her friends that are married that don't have children yet, they actually still kind of tend to be more liberal. So women, get married, have kids, and it'll make you more conservative, I promise you, because you'll start caring about whether or not there are thugs from other countries who shouldn't be here running around stabbing you. You will start to care about that kind of stuff. But Christianity Today, these churches, here's a few words here. Palm Sunday looked different this year from a small majority immigrant church in Fort Worth. Probably the immigrants are like illegal immigrants. And it goes on, it says there's a lot of fear in our church in regard to this law and a lot of uncertainty. What does it mean? How does it affect their cases? asked Andrea Keno, one of the pastors, Andrea, is this a guy or is that a guy's name? Honoria? Honora? Anyways, the congregation, mostly first-generation immigrants from Latin America. I think we can read between the lines and say these are illegal aliens that are in the country. Not here. Really following the law. Knows they can come to us. So here's the thing, right? Here's the bill, and you're supposed to subscribe to Christianity Today. We're not going to do that, but I already know where we're going with this. So Christianity Today has their whole spiel about this of how terrible it is that these illegal aliens are about to be deported, and we have these churches, like, what are we going to do? We've got to meet their needs. We've got to help them the best we can. This gets down to a fundamental problem. The government took over charity and benevolence from the churches. I promise you, this church right here, which I don't know, this church may be entirely by illegal people who are not supposed to be here, but the church, there are enough people in need in America. We do not need to be taking on anybody from the outside. That is why our social care system, what's the word I'm looking for? The programs designed to help people on welfare, all of that, that's why we are under such a great burden as far as paying taxes to the government for them to help all these people, is because there's enough people in the United States that we need to be worried about ourselves. And if churches would stop letting the government take over the responsibility of charity and we could meet those needs, the welfare problem would largely just go away overnight. It really would, because there's a few fundamental things. Number one, there are people that abuse the welfare system. I know, shocking. They abuse it. And the government will hand out checks to many people that don't need it. If we got rid of those social welfare programs and it just became the local church, the local community taking care of those in need, you would absolutely axe a large number, the majority of people probably, that are even on welfare. That would happen, number one. Now, that is only if we're helping the people that actually should be here. There are enough people alone that need our help. So all the people that are here illegally, they don't need our support. They need to go back to their own communities to where those communities can meet their needs. Oh, these poor, people trying to escape oppression and fill in the blank. Right, that's the line. These military-age males, these 20-something-year-old men that are flooding across the border, they need our help. They need our benevolence. Now, here's what happens then. If the check that you're receiving comes from the neighbor down the road in the form of groceries or paying the electric bill, whatever, you are not going to be near as comfortable with taking a check week in and week out, month in, month out, and being a burden upon the people that you know. Because they have their own responsibilities. They are trying to make a living. They're trying to feed their children. So you're not going to be okay with just taking a handout from your neighbor or the local church even. Because the local church is made up of your neighbors. It is way easier to take a check from Uncle Sam. Oh yeah, the government's giving me that money. It's not my neighbor down the road that I'm taking that money from. It's the government. The government has endless amounts of money. Suddenly, the number of people that would be willing to be on welfare also goes drastically down. And then for the remainder who actually do need help, well, then you've limited enough to where, yeah, they can get their help and we can do what we can. And used to, there were a lot of other means. Like there were programs where people could basically live at the church or even, some other institutions to where they could somehow work and at least provide some kind of good, to provide some kind of benefit. There were means and ways of handling all those. And then the only other thing you've got to do after that is you've got to reopen the insane asylums. Man, I am just sounding crazy, aren't I? You got to get the crazy people off the streets and put them back in insane asylums. And it's so funny because modern day TV has made the insane asylums out to be, oh my gosh, the people that worked in these insane asylums, they were horrible, evil people doing tests on people. Once again, we let Hollywood make history for us. We've let Hollywood determine what the reality, or what our perceived reality of history was. That's what you do. You start making people, if they really need help, seek it from the local community, and then the number of people that will receive help go down, and the people that are genuinely crazy, on welfare, living on the streets, you lock them up. You lock them up. Debt, debt, more debt. Mountains of debt. That's right, Scott, because we keep giving people money that don't need it. They don't need the money. My goodness. We got to fix the problem. We got to fix it. Again, talking about church, it said you definitely need brick and mortar along with a metal roof in your area. A metal roof, yes, because of hail. Metal roofs last a lot longer than shingle, even though shingle looks really nice. Now, I think they are making some shingle nowadays that's a lot stronger and looks pretty. Once again, it's money, I get it, but the reality is, if you build a church well, and you give it, like you make a rock church, that church will stand for a long time. The sheet metal will eventually get dented. It'll eventually start to corrode, decay. That rock church is going to stand a lifetime. You just got to build it nice enough to where you can use it for all that time. That's the truth. Okay, now, that's my comments there on this matter of the welfare state and churches and needing to do your job. Let's do a recap on our session number 3. That's another one that I want to talk about. And still working on configuring the website. There's a few little glitchy things that popped up. So if you go to the website, you can find the sermon notes for all sessions. It's just being finicky. I've got to figure out what to do. Just bear with me. Okay, now let's recap the Bible conference session number 3. If you do go to my website, I'll show you the session. Session number 1, we looked at the evidence, the textual evidence for a 6-day creation. Then we looked at the evidence and purpose of the flood. And we finished up with dinosaurs in the Bible. Now, dinosaurs in the Bible, that's just kind of a short title to kind of capture all of it. But if you go here to the website, you will see in the final version, we investigate the age of the earth, the gap theory, and how dinosaurs fit into the Bible. So in this session, you can click on the sermon video link right here, and it will take you to Worshipify, and you can click on that. But the issue is right now, the PDF and some of the other attachments don't work exactly right. But in this, we investigated a lot of things. The scientific speculation about the age of the earth, and obviously some of the mistakes that they make. We then looked at the gap theory. The gap theory is increasingly more interesting to me. And there's a lot to be said. Why, when the earth was first created, it didn't say that God created water and on day 1. It's on day 1 when God created light, the water covered the face of the earth, and the earth was without form and void. Where did the water come from? If we look in 2 Peter, there really are some interesting things that he says that make us have to pause and think, what is going on? What really did take place? 2 Peter chapter 3. It is so interesting whenever we look at this. The heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that was then being overflowed with water perished. And then you read that, and it does sound a whole lot like the flood. So this could have been the world pre-flood. But, verse 7, but the heavens and the earth which are now. Why the heavens? Why would the heavens be different than what are now? Because the heavens weren't destroyed in the flood. It really is almost as if there was a remaking of everything. And I do not want to accept the gap theory because the scientists tell me the earth is millions of years old. I don't care what the scientists say. Nothing about that is going to influence how I interpret the Bible, plain and simple. I very much defend, excuse me. I apologize, I'm still battling a little bit of the crud that I had. But I don't defend the gap theory because of what science says. I do not care. It's all about the textual evidence for me. The textual evidence is the sole authority. Therefore, whenever I look at the textual evidence, there seems to be some room there to say, yeah, there may have been a world that existed before. Now, I know that there's some who hold to the gap theory here, and you can give me your thoughts on it. The only thing I still struggle with is the gap theory would have death taking place before the fall. Why would there be death before the fall? There must have been some other kind of fall beforehand, right? Did the old earth include humans? Now, I know we could start theorizing cavemen, all of this, which cavemen, they had 23 pairs of chromosomes. They were humans. Science loves to do this thing that, oh yes, the cavemen were an earlier species of man. What's the definition of a species? They can reproduce and have fertile offspring. If cavemen had 23 pairs of chromosomes, just like us, and they'll even say today, oh yeah, people carry around traces of caveman DNA. That means that they were human. They were man. So, where does all that fit in? I am at the point now with the gap theory that I'm kind of, I hate to use the term because it makes it sound like I don't care, but I really almost have a state of indifference towards the gap theory. The gap theory could be true, it could be false. It doesn't change my worldview a whole lot. Because, and this is even true even for gap theorists, the gap theorist was, or this is a, I'm regathering my thoughts here. How are we able to have death prior to the fall of Adam? Do we say that death existed for animals beforehand? And if so, why would have death taken place? There must have been some other cause. What happened, what started in the old world that resulted in death? Because whenever God remade the world, I would argue that the world remade, there was no death. Cliff, I know that you're somebody who defends the gap theory, and looking at your comments here, you said the death was the death of men. So the fall of Adam started with the death of men. But I don't know if I'm okay with saying that we had the death of animals prior to the fall, though. And maybe even, and if in the gap theory, I would define it as the old world had death. Then when God remade the world in 6 days, the world remade in 6 days, there was no death, and death did not take place until the fall of man. And then you can even go forward from there, and then you don't have maybe animals eating each other until after the flood. There's some room there to discuss and address some of that. So the gap theory is very interesting. It's one that I would like to do some more investigation on. I think that there's some interesting stuff there. And that really is my only hang-up. It is just the matter of the fall and where death comes in and all of that. You know, God looking over creation and saying, this is very good. So, with that, if it turns out, whenever we have a full understanding, right, Cliff and I understand, all the gap is between Genesis 1:1 to 1:2. I do understand that. We don't have, the gap theory is encompassed in that. Scott also says you're equally indifferent. We just don't know towards the gap theory and thinking that the world is just 6,000 years old. Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. And the world now, I will say, the world now that we have is 6,000 years old. It is. But was there a world beforehand? Was the earth previously flooded? Before the flood that we know of recorded in Genesis chapter 6 through 9? Was there another destructive event that took place? If so, then that would give us the grounds to say, okay, maybe we did have a world beforehand, but anything that we have now, and I'm a firm believer in this, anything that we have now, the sun, the moon, the stars, any current living plants, all of that originated from the creation that took place 6,000 years ago. That is going to be my position, because I think that we do have to start with Genesis 1:2. I'm not saying we have to start at Genesis 1:1, but from Genesis 1:2, we have to move forward literally, and that only gives us a 6,000-year-old creation as it is today. So Adam lived 6,000 years ago. Everything that took place between now and then was 6,000 years ago. Was there something that took place prior to that? Maybe so, but it would all have been encompassed in Genesis 1:1 and referenced maybe by Peter in 2 Peter chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. That is my position on all that. So I really am kind of in a state of indifference towards it, and I have a lot of sympathy for it because there is some of the parallelism, and that's another thing I talked about on my recap. I addressed the parallelism of the gap theorists, and they say, listen, there's a lot of harmony, there's a lot of rhyming whenever it comes to the flow in the Bible. And if Revelation ends with an old world being passing away and a new world being created, I do see the value, the merit in saying Genesis needs to reflect that there was an old world that passed away and a new world created. But once again, I don't hold the gap theory or consider the gap theory because of science telling me that I have to accept it. So, it is very interesting. And I may continue to study that line. I mean, I know there were some brilliant theologians that held it. And once again, they did not hold it because of what science told them. I think that's the big error, because when you start letting science dictate how you interpret the Bible, the Word of God is not your primary authority. Science can trump the Bible. And they'll say, no. We're just saying that science helps us to better understand the Bible. I really take issue with that, because when you start saying that, what happens whenever science comes up with something that says something else in the Bible that we had previously taken literally cannot be taken literally? What if, for example, science said, nope, there's no evidence that the Red Sea was ever parted. We have clear evidence that it never was, never could be. There's scientific evidence that there never was a Star of Bethlehem. Never. Well, okay, I guess we got to reinterpret the Star of Bethlehem as being something figurative. It couldn't have been literal. It couldn't have been an actual star. Where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? And I think that for us to say Genesis, the creation story, Genesis 1 through all of them, or the gap theory, Genesis 1-2 through the remainder of the chapter, if we wouldn't have had science today, everybody would have defended at least our world as we know it today as 6,000 years old, and then there maybe was a gap. Cliff also adds, too much evidence in the Bible alludes to this. God created two types of living beings, us and angels, and they seem to have been divided. So the angels, the Nephilim, you think are potentially tied to this? You like the answers in Genesis theory of just what the flood was? The seams of the planet ripped open from stern to stern, so to speak. I don't know what answers in Genesis holds about the flood, but it needs to be a global flood. And I'd imagine probably answers in Genesis defends a global flood. It has to be a global flood. There is no way. That's another thing I addressed in our session 2. The flood has to be interpreted as a global flood. There is no room to say it's a local event. The Bible's too clear on that matter. All right. Have any comments or questions or anything? Where do you want to go from here? This is now, we've finished the topics that I want to discuss. Is there anywhere that you would like to go that you would like to discuss? I'll give you just a few minutes. How has the live stream been? Has it been running pretty smooth? I'm very happy. We seem to have a live stream here that's working. I did some work with Nathan, the creator of Worshipify. He helped me insert some new coding into our software and our equipment that maybe helped us. And it seems to be working a lot better. I'm very excited about that, very happy about that. If you want to continue talking about the gap theory, we can do that as well. One of the conclusions I had is I think that dinosaurs could have made it on the ark. I really think they could have. And also, I really think that we got to reassess the way we view the ark. I don't think that the ark had a bunch of full-grown animals. I think what you had is you had a collection of animals that were more so adolescent. That way they would have a long lifespan, lots of breeding years to repopulate the earth. I don't see the reason why we should interpret the animals going on the ark as being some full-grown, massive, mature, current age. So, anyways, I think there's a lot there. I think there's a lot of reasons to defend the ark, to defend all the different types. It's not like we had every single species and subspecies. Yeah, I know that's where I'm getting a little bit glitchy. The good thing is once I upload this, it's going to run just fine. So, a little bit still struggling, but we're getting there. The thing about Starlink is it's only supposed to get better. As more satellites get launched, the internet's supposed to be faster and faster. It's supposed to be more and more reliable. I think what happened was early on, whenever I was streaming with Starlink, which is what I'm still using, I think the satellites were configured in such a way to where I did get consistent connection the whole time. I think whatever reason, the state that they're at right now, there maybe is a little bit of a gap. So while that antenna is shifting from one satellite to the next, we're having a little bit of a drop, because every time I do a check for speed, the speed is good. It's just that whenever it has to do the jump from one to the next, it goes down a little bit in what its ability. But as Starlink continues to expand, it's going to get better. As a matter of fact, I think that we're going to look at getting Starlink for the church. And whenever we get Starlink for the church, it'll be really, really nice. Be really nice. I'm excited about that because we're going to start live streaming so much more. I've been getting donations from you. Thank you all so much. We're getting closer to having another switcher. And whenever I get that other switcher, it will stay at the church, which will make my life way easier. And the only other thing is a camera. And once I get a camera, a second camera that will stay at the church, life will be even better. I'll be able to live stream, record, do so much more. And so thank you. Just as you're able to, you can continue to support it. So Cliff, I just saw your comment. My upload speed is still crippled by uploading at 1080p. So I have tried to change my upload speed. The issue is the upload speed is only able to be 1080. All right, well, it looks like my streaming is shutting off here. I'm going to go ahead and cut it off there. Things are getting a little bit better. I made it to 43-ish minutes. So with that, this has been Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I am Pastor Mark Baze. Thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow. Thank you all, and we'll see you soon. We're having a little bit of a drop because every time I do a